So welcome and thank you for joining RSTP this afternoon for an update on the forms and guides for Group of 5 and community sponsorship under the Private Sponsorship of Refugees program. My name is Bethlehem Mbai and I'm the RSTP trainer based in Edmonton. And joining me is my colleague, Christina Hammer, who is the curriculum developer for RSTP. And together we will be your host. The purpose of this session is to inform you about the changes made by IRCC to the application forms and application guides for Group of 5 and community sponsors, which have been in effect since November 1st. And now it can be also found on the IRCC website. So if you have not already accessed the new resources, we will show you how to locate the forms and guides on this training. We would like to begin by acknowledging that each of us here today are located in various places across this nation we call Canada, and we are each residing on the traditional territory of many First Nations peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto, the location of the RSTP main office, is situated on the lands of many First Nations peoples, including Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Dish with one spoon, one palm, and Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And so we invite you to personally dedicate time to learn about, reflect on, and acknowledge the story and land for the First Nations people, where you reside, and to personally consider how we can each, in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I will provide a bit of information on what RSTP does. RSTP provides information, training, and resources for all aspects of the private sponsorship process. We offer workshops and webinars and online training courses. We also provide support to sponsors by phone or email for case-specific inquiries. We can review your application package before you submit them to IRCC. Then when the newcomers you are sponsoring arrive, we can help you connect with a local agency that will provide mini settlement support services. All of our services are funded by our IRCC, so there are no fees for what we provide. And if you are interested in any of the services, you can contact us through our helpline number listed on the slide or find resources on our website. In terms of our agenda today, we will review some basic information about the PSR program. We will take a look at the sponsorship application package and what it needs to contain. We will look at some critical updates to the application forms and the application guides. We will also talk a bit about the pre-arrival verifications and then have some time for question and answers. So moving on, because of limited time, there are a few details we will not be able to cover in this particular session. We will not be able to discuss on how to become a sponsor, about the financial requirements for sponsoring, on who can be sponsored, or any case-specific questions. If you have questions on these topics, please take a look at our other information resources. We have a monthly webinar series that goes into detail about everything from applying to sponsor to the supports required once refugees arrive in Canada. We produce a bi-weekly RSTP bulletin that contains answers to current questions on sponsorship and any timely information. You can look through the resources on our website as well, or connect with your local trainer if you have a case-specific questions that you would like to discuss. This is just a quick recap about the private sponsorship of refugees program. As you know, the private sponsorship of refugees program is one of Canada's first initiatives for refugee resettlement, and it serves as a refugee protection tool. It allows private sponsors in Canada to apply to bring refugees to Canada. The program requires that sponsors commit to provide 12 months of financial and settlement support to the refugees once they arrive in Canada. When it comes to who can be a sponsor, it's not something that you can do alone. Sponsorship must be done by a group. That group can be an organization called a SA, which is a sponsorship agreement holder. Those are incorporated organizations that have signed an agreement with the government of Canada to sponsor refugees. SAs may then authorize constituent groups or co-sponsors to sponsor under the SAS agreement. Sponsorship may also be done by a group of 5, comprised of 5 Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or persons with Indian status that lives in the same community of settlement. And sponsorship, again, may be done by a community sponsor. So community sponsors are organizations located in the community where the refugees are expected to live and act as guarantors that the necessary settlement support would be provided for the full duration of the sponsorship. Unlike SAS, community sponsors do not hold an ongoing agreement with the government of Canada, so they must show they have the necessary financial resources, expertise, and commitment required to fulfill the terms of the sponsorship undertaking and apply again for each specific sponsorship individually. So today's session mainly focuses on updates to forms and guides for Group of 5 and community sponsors. But if you are interested in information about SAS or working with SAS, please see our website for our monthly workshop on working with SAS that will give you a detailed information on the SAS. So the sponsorship process. You can think of the sponsorship process as having 5 stages. The first stage that comes is planning. That is when you organize your sponsorship group and learn about the various sponsorship responsibilities. Then the second stage that comes is application. That is when you create the plan to provide targeted support to the refugees you want to sponsor and fill the application package. The third stage is pre-arrival. That's when IRCC may ask your sponsor group to confirm your funds and settlement plan just before the refugees travel to Canada. Then it is the actual sponsorship, which is the 12 months of the sponsorship period. At the last stage is completion. That's when your group and the newcomers you are sponsoring plan for the next steps and transition from the sponsorship supports to the newcomers' independence. So basically, the training today focuses on a small part of stage 2, the application stage. And as we mentioned before, there are a number of things we will not be able to cover today. So we use this graphic to show you where today's information fits in the sponsorship process. And as we move on, we will look at what needs to be included in the application package, either for a group of 5 or for a community sponsorship. So the application package. When we refer to application package, as many of you may already know, there are 2 sets to an application package. There is a sponsorship application set and a permanent residence application set. And together, they form the application package for sponsoring a refugee. When it comes to the refugee sponsorship, again, it's understanding the terminology used is important to have better understanding. So in this case, when we say the refugees overseas is called the principal applicant, and the people in Canada are called the sponsors. And even though everyone is filling out applicant materials, only the refugee overseas is called the principal applicant. And the sponsorship application process involves completing required forms, submitting supporting documents, and following a helpful guide, which we are going to look at shortly. In order to apply for permanent residence, the refugees overseas are required to fill out specific forms and provide necessary documents. In situations where refugees are unable to fill forms on their own due to limited internet or computer access, it is possible for someone in Canada or overseas to assist them in filling out the necessary forms. Now we will take a closer look at the application package for a group of 5 and community sponsorship. For a group of 5, the sponsorship application portion includes the sponsorship undertaking and settlement plan, which is a central part of the application. This form requires detailed information about how the sponsoring group intends to support the refugees during their first year in Canada. And in addition to that, each sponsor in the group of 5 fills out a sponsor assessment form, and those sponsors who are providing funds for the sponsorship also fill out a financial assessment form. And to further support the plans and information in the forms, sponsors must provide copies of their ID cards, criminal record check, and proof of funds they are providing for the sponsorship. And just like before, all sponsorship forms are PDF documents. So the sponsoring group must download the forms, fills them, and they can upload them into the digital portal to prepare and submit the complete application package. Okay, so the refugees overseas fills out a generic application form for permanent resident. This form is their application to come to Canada. Also, as refugees, they fill out a Schedule A, which includes some background information about the refugee. So now the change is that these 2 forms can be filled directly online through the digital portal. And there is also a required Schedule 2 form where the refugees is able to explain the history of how they become a refugee. This form is not filled online, so it must be downloaded as a PDF, filled, and uploaded to the digital portal. And to complete the permanent residence application portion, refugees need to provide photos, and when sponsored by a group of 5, the refugees need to provide proof of their refugee status by including a refugee status document. Okay, the application package for community sponsorship is similar to that of a group of 5, but there are some differences. They are not exactly the same. For the community sponsorship, the sponsorship application portion also includes the critical sponsorship undertaking and settlement plan. However, the form is slightly different because community sponsor organization need to provide some information about their organization. The community sponsor, signing authority, and any co-sponsor fill sponsor assessment form. And those sponsors who are providing funds for the sponsorship also fill out a financial assessment form. And to support the plans and information in the forms, signing authorities and co-sponsors must provide copies of their identification, a criminal record check, and proof of the funds provided for the sponsorship. Like with the group of 5, all sponsorship forms are PDF documents. A sponsoring group, again, downloads the forms, fills them, and they can upload them into the digital portal in preparation for submitting the whole application package. And again, the forms and supporting documents for the refugees are the same, whether being sponsored by a group of 5 or community sponsor organization. Again, the generic form and the Schedule A can be filled directly online through the digital portal. And like the group of 5 Schedule 2 form, it must be downloaded as a PDF, filled, and uploaded to the digital portal. And like the group of 5, need to provide a refugee status document. There are a couple of additional forms that a sponsorship group may need to use. There is a form for having a representative who assists the refugees with filling their forms. There is also a form for when a sponsor requires a representative to assist with the sponsorship on behalf of the sponsors. Any additional forms are listed in the application guides that we are about to discuss. The sponsorship application guide. Each application has a very detailed guide that goes with the forms. There is a guide for group of 5, one for community sponsorship, and one for the refugees permanent residence application. The guides are very useful because they outline how to fill a successful application, help you understand the recent change to the application process, tell you how to avoid common mistakes, and help you check what documents are required. And this is important because IRCC will only process application packages that are complete with no missing documentation. And the guide helps you understand how to manage the process after submitting an application. The guide for group of 5 is called the IMM 2200, and it has information very specific to what group of 5 need to do. Okay, the guide for community sponsors. Similarly, the guide for community sponsorship is specific to the application and support requirements for community sponsor organizations. The community sponsor guide is IMM 2201, and it provides a comprehensive overview of the application process for community sponsors. It offers guidance on filling a successful application, understanding recent change to the process, avoiding common mistakes, checking necessary documents, and managing the process after submission. Okay, so moving on, we will see at the guide for convention refugees and humanitarian protected persons abroad. So there is a separate guide for the application materials filled by the refugee offices. This guide is numbered IMM 6000. This guide has information specifically to help the refugees fill all their required forms, and it lists any supporting documents. This guide also helps the refugee understand the recent change to the application process, This guide also explains who is eligible to come to Canada through the PSR program and check the required documents, as well as who can be included in one application package. And we will review who can be in one application shortly. So now let's take a minute to look at how to navigate through the guides. They have a lot of information in them. And once you know how to find the information more easily, you'll be able to take a full advantage of the information. To be able to find the guides, I will take you to the RSTP website, www.rstp.ca. And when you go to the application section, there is a part that says application forms. All the guides and forms can be found in this page. The new forms and guides are also available on IRCC's website. It's much easier to access the documents from our website instead of going directly to the IRCC website. Scroll down and see the guide for Group of 5. So this is the guide 2200 for Group of 5 to privately sponsored refugees. When you go to that page, you will notice that as of November 1st, 2023, you can apply online through the permanent residence portal. There is a hyperlink to the permanent residence portal that you can use. And there are announcements that are posted on the website. But now I will just quickly take you down to step 4 of the guide to look at the document checklist. The document checklist looks like this. And as we scroll down, you will be able to see the application forms and documents required. The first part is the sponsorship forms. So all the sponsorship forms that are needed to be included with the application package are listed here. The second part is the supporting documents required for assessment. So you can see what type of documents needs to be included with the application once you are ready to submit the whole package. As you scroll down, you will see the refugees form and supporting documents. And as I mentioned, you can get the forms directly from this page. It is a hyperlink. Yeah, and the other forms that we have talked about, the use of representatives, the appointment of representatives in the expected community of settlement are here. And the guide basically gives you everything, like the thing that we have talked about today, everything is from the guide. So I'll pass to Christina for the second section of this training.
Okay, thanks, Betty. As Betty mentioned, just before I go on to show you some of the details about the changes in the forms, just a quick note here on who can be included in the refugees permanent residence application. So I'm sure many of you know this, but just for any of you who might not be aware, the principal applicant, right, we've talked about the refugee overseas, they are of course on their own application package. Accompanying them on the application package, they can include their spouse or common law partner and any dependent children of the principal applicant or their spouse. So as you're aware, you know, families take different shapes and sizes, so it can be the dependent children of the principal applicant or their spouse, so long as the children are under 22 and unmarried. If any of those children are, for example, 19 or 20 and they're married, then they have to be on their own application package with their own family. and their own dependents. So the children have to be under 22 and unmarried. And as a reminder, the principal applicant's spouse and children are still included in the application form, even if those family members do not plan to come to Canada at the same time as the PA. So the Canadian government and our immigration policies, we have a legal commitment to keeping families together. So what this means is that when the principal applicant applies to come to Canada, they have to show on their application their spouse or common law partner and their dependent children under 22, even if those people are not planning on coming to Canada right away with them. So that's just a quick note on who can be included on one application package. So your sponsorship group could potentially sponsor a principal applicant, their spouse or common law partner, and then let's say their dependent children are over 22. You could still potentially in your sponsoring group fill out 2 application packages and still sponsor all of those people, provided that your group has enough resources that you can show that you can provide the settlement and financial support. So don't be deterred by who can be on one application. Just understand that when IRCC processes that application, they have to see these family shapes together in order to process. Another quick note on changes that have happened with these forms updates. All forms are now able to be signed digitally. So for any of you who have tried signing these forms before, you went through filling the form as a PDF and then having to print out the signature page, sign it with a pen, and then rescan it. Well, now IRCC is able to accept the PDF with a digital signature. So for those of you who are very comfortable and aware of how PDFs work, there is the possibility of including your signature within the PDF without having to print it out and write on it. So those digital signatures are now accepted. It is still possible, however, and acceptable to print the page, write your signature on it, and then rescan the signature page. There are instructions on signing in the guides. So as Betty mentioned, all of this comes from the guides. Also, another note, the sponsorship forms cannot be filled online. So they are all PDFs. And what this means is that you actually have to find the PDF, download the PDF, save it to your computer, then fill it, and then resave it with the name that you're going to need in order to submit it to IRCC. So I'm actually going to show you what that looks like. It's not exactly a workshop. You're not going to get a chance to try it. We're going to have to sort of go quickly to the next slides, but I'd like to show you just in case you don't know what it looks like. So here I am at the RSTP website. I'm going to go exactly where Betty went before, to applications and application forms, because for me, this is the easiest way to find the form that I want. So I'm scrolling past the section on sponsorship agreement holders because I don't need their forms. I'm going to go past group sub 5, pardon me. I'm going to go past group sub 5 down to community sponsors. So I'm in the community sponsors section. And what I'd like to do is find the sponsorship undertaking and settlement plan. So I'm going to click on that. So the community sponsorship undertaking is called the IMM 5663. You can also search for it by name, but you'll see, I'm just going to make my window a little bit bigger so you can see the whole message. You can see that I get this funny message that says the document you are trying to load requires Adobe Reader 8 or higher. Well, you may have Adobe Reader 8 or higher, and still you will get this message. So what's happening here is the forms were not designed to be filled online. They were designed to be downloaded and saved to your computer so that you can fill them. So what I do is I click download this file, and I'm going to save this form to my desktop. And now it's here. here on my desktop. So if I open it, I don't get that message anymore. I can see the form and it is fillable. In case you are not familiar with all of the numbers for the forms, what I recommend is that you save the form as part of its title, right? So this one I might decide to save as a settlement plan. So I still want to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to call it settlement plan. And then ever again, of course, when I go to look for it, it's called settlement plan. So that was an example of how to download and save the forms. Now, you don't have to know exactly how to do that now just after watching me do it. You can, of course, take a look at the guide. It will have a little bit of information. You can certainly call a trainer if you would like some extra help. I'm going to move on now because I want to actually show you the content of one of the changed forms. We're going to take a look at the Undertaking and Settlement Plan. So that's the one that I just downloaded for the community sponsor. So it doesn't show the whole form. There's about 3 slides and they have different parts of the form. But I just wanted to let you know that they look very similar. The settlement needs checklist between groups of 5 and community sponsors is the same. But the form itself may have some differences in it because of the type of sponsor. So let me talk a little bit about the IMM 5670 for groups of 5. So for all private sponsorship groups, the Undertaking and Settlement Plan form has been updated and has some notable changes. For any of you who might have started to fill this form and now it's changed and been updated, or for any of you who might have done sponsorship applications before, you might be familiar with the 5-question format. So the old form used to have 5 questions that sponsors had to fill with detailed sentence style answers. Now the form has an extended settlement needs checklist that actually replaces those questions. The same information is included. However, the checklist allows your sponsorship group to also show who will be responsible for each task. So you can see in this slide that part of the slide is a list of tasks and the other side is who will provide the support or additional details about this information. You'll also notice from this snip that the checklist is divided into tasks over time. This is also new. So there was a short settlement needs checklist in the previous version of the form, but it didn't have any distinction about when those tasks happened. So actually this form, you may find it easier in helping you plan what it is that your group needs to do over the 12 months of the sponsorship. So the checklist begins with any tasks that happen throughout or ongoing through the sponsorship year. Then there's a section on tasks required before the refugees arrive, and then when the refugees arrive and for the first 3 weeks. That's what we can see here on this slide. If we continue, the checklist goes on actually to cover all periods of the 12 months of sponsorship. And so in this way, it actually covers the entire sponsorship timeline, going through the first months to the last months. And you may notice, for example, that between months 1 and 3, there are things like ensure that refugees are informed about and connected to settlement services. Whereas in months 7 to 9, it's something like identify any unmet service needs. So you kind of go through introducing the refugees to information that they need. And excuse me, by the time they've arrived, they are no longer refugees, they are newcomers. So months 1 to 3, you're going to introduce the newcomers to new information landing in Canada. Whereas by the time you get to month 9 and then 10 through 12, what you're actually trying to do is make sure that anything that needed to be addressed during the sponsorship year has been addressed so that you don't miss anything. So that way you have a checklist from months 1 to 12, as well as anything ongoing. In addition to the checklist, the Undertaking and Settlement Plan forms, both for Group of 5 and community sponsors, includes, of course, a budget. And the budget includes one-time startup costs and ongoing monthly costs. And this is very similar to the previous version of the form. Some of the wording, a tiny little bit of the wording you will find may look a little bit different if you happen to start using the old form and you're now looking at the new form. The costs, just so that you know, are calculated based on the sponsorship cost table. So I don't have that on this slide at the moment, but we go over in detail the sponsorship cost table and how to create your budget according to family size. We go over all of this information in our monthly webinars. So if what I'm saying to you doesn't sound familiar, and this is all new information for you, please do take a look at our monthly webinars training, because it will really help you. And of course, always go back to the guide, because the guide is the original set of instructions on how to fill out these forms and what your required responsibilities are for sponsorship. Just as a reminder, this sponsorship cost estimate is based on the family that is allowed to be put together on one application. So this will be based on the principal applicant, their spouse or common law partner, and any dependent children under 22. In addition to the actual budget, part of the supporting documentation that you give is proof of funds. And for some of you, the concept of proof of funds will be familiar if you have some experience with sponsorship or you've already started filling an application. I want to put it in here because we're going to talk about another part of the sponsorship process next, and we're going to talk a little bit more about proof of funds there. So just as a reminder, the proof of funds, the very first thing it says to you in the guide is, of course, as you know, that funds cannot come from the refugee. So refugees cannot fund their own sponsorship to Canada. It needs to come from the sponsoring group. In order for IRCC officers to understand and be able to prove themselves when they approve your application, they need to know that the funds didn't come from the refugees, so they need to see documentation. So if your group does any fundraising activities, please find a way to document those activities so that you can show any fundraising money and where it came from. Document any funds contributed by co-sponsors. So if you're a group of 5, whoever in the group is providing funds, there has to be documentation to show where those funds came from. If it's a community sponsorship and there are co-sponsors working with an organization, same thing. Funds contributed by co-sponsors, there has to be documentation to show where those funds came from. It's important that there are records for any funds that are put into a sponsorship bank account. And so best practice is to avoid cash contributions. I know that many different people have systems of collecting cash. The trouble with cash is there's no way to show that those funds did not come from the refugee, even if they didn't. So you really want to document your source of funds. The minimum acceptable amount of funds is based on the sponsorship cost estimate, and that can be found in the sponsorship guides in the appendix called financial guidelines. So any of the guides that have financial guidelines, it's in an appendix and you can find it there. So let me tell you why we're talking about proof of funds while we're talking about the changes in the documentation and the updated forms. If we move through the sponsorship process, imagine that your group has submitted their application and it's been approved. And now you're just wondering when the newcomers are going to be set up to come to Canada. IRCC has always had the ability to do what are called pre-arrival verification. It's actually a part of the IRPR, the Immigration and Protection Regulations. And now it's included as instructions in the guides. And so when you are planning and filling out your forms, what you need to be aware of is that for any cases submitted as of January, IRCC will be able to select cases at random and request that your group do a pre-arrival verification. And this is, they will ask you to send an updated settlement plan. So that's the checklist, the document that I showed you how to download, that has the big checklist in it, and that has the sponsorship cost estimate in it. And as well, you need to send all your proof of funds. So this is not the same as sending what you sent with your application. These are updated. Your sponsoring group has 30 days to respond. So there is time for you to collect your documentation and respond. There is a calendar month. So if anything has changed over the months that it took to work through the application process, you'll want to update the settlement plan and you'll want to update your proof of funds, right? So some of you know that part of the proof of funds is that you show any money that's in a bank account. So updated proof of funds would be to send any updated banking information that has occurred in the months since you sent the application forms in. There's all kinds of information in the application guide for this. And when IRCC sends the request for pre-arrival verification, they will also send instructions with that request. So just be aware that pre-arrival verification, while it was always possible, and there were even groups that actually did offer up pre-arrival verification information, it is now included in the guide and something that IRCC wants your group to be ready to provide information about. So again, this is only for cases submitted as of January 1st. So if any of you are submitting before January 1st, just know you still are legally subject to pre-arrival verification, but IRCC will formally be doing these random selections as of January 1st, any cases submitted as of January 1st. So I'm just going to move on and show you our contact information. So you can call our helpline if you have case questions that you want to ask about, because we won't be able to answer case questions in this session. And we also have a list of trainers if you want to email the trainer from your area. Now, the one thing I will tell you is it's really helpful sometimes if you're working on an application and you have specific questions, for example, about costs in your area or something like that. The trainer in your area is an expert on your area, so they're very helpful in that way. Their email addresses and which area they cover are listed on our website at rstp.ca/contact-us. And just to give you an idea, we have trainers located across Canada. So in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the Atlantic provinces, and Ontario. For any of you who this might be pertinent for, the one place we don't have trainers is in Quebec, because Quebec has its own immigration programs and its own sponsorship programs. For those of you that are starting to put questions in now, I'm always thrilled as a trainer, because it means that you're really thinking about this process, and the more questions you have, the more engaged you are, the more I understand that you're taking in the information. So I'm very happy to see your questions, and I'm very sad that we can't answer them all now, because we all benefit from hearing each other's questions. Questions that are specific about the digital portal, we're not going to be able to answer by email because we have a training on that. Please go and find the training on the digital portal. The trainings that we have are listed on our website. So if you go to rstp.ca, And there's a heading in the menu called Trainings, and you can look and see what our current trainings are in the drop-down menu, and it should bring up a calendar, and it will show you what the upcoming trainings are. Each training will have its own link for you to register. And of course, if you have any questions about those trainings, please call our helpline, and someone will be able to respond anytime between 9 in the morning and 7 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, I think that ends our session for today. Thank you so much to those of you who took the time out to spend 2 hours with us. We hope that the information was useful, and we hope to hear your voices and see your names and maybe see your faces sometime again in the near future.